when we see flashbacks of Big Frank coming out of World War II and starting out in the Maravelli family, we have this bond that by the time the book opens 15 years later in 1960, Big Frank is ensconced as the number 2 or the number 3 man in the organization. He's one of Bit's right-hand men. And then we have some things like the ass rape delicious boy thing. We see Big Frank showing somewhat of a conscience about the polluting lakes with waste material where Paulie doesn't give a shit. So we get the sense that there's some kind of a slight fracture between them. We find out then that Paulie has met up with Carla, and the minute that Big Frank meets her, he takes up with her too behind Paulie's back. So something has gone awry with them, and we don't really know if this is if the ultimate demise of Paulie is because Big Frank has turned on him, or has Big Frank really just been biding his time for 20-some years. We do know, I think, that Big Frank is aware of Paulie's medical condition. Early on in the book, in the first book, we know that he had found out about the orgone box, that Paulie had a mistress, and we find out there's a scene where he smiles once he gets the address, and it's thousands of pages before he actually acts upon it at the end of the book and kills the mistress. But so there are hints that they were really and truly close, and then they drifted apart, or at least Big Frank drifted from Paulie. Paulie was unawares of it. But it also could be that Big Frank was just being himself. And like I said, the last time we talked, we had the scene with the hooker with the heart of gold kind of thing, although it's not as cliched as it sounds. It's not cliched at all, really. But Big Frank, we don't really know much about him. We see the externals of Big Frank, and we get some of the internals, like with the sneaker on the wires scene and whatnot. But even so, despite all of that, I think most people reading the book are going to end up being personally disappointed in Big Frank for doing that, because if they haven't read the Vincetti brothers, they don't know the cold, calculating super criminal that he is in that book. Here he is in that stage of becoming, but I think most readers would be rooting for Big Frank to be the good bad guy. And he turns out not to be, that he's as bad as Paulie. Jessica, or some people who've read it have said that in a sense he's worse. I don't think he's any worse than Paulie. I think Paulie would have done the exact same thing. It's just that in this version of reality, it's Big Frank who is the guy who's able to take advantage of Paulie's affection for him. And that's Paulie, as I said, that is Paulie's one Achilles heel. Is Paulie has an undue affection for some people. That's why he tolerates the idiocy of Vito Vincetti. That's why, when Tony Luft comes to him, telling him that his wife is planning to kill him, instead of being insulted or whatnot and threatening to kill Luft, he at some level knows that Luft is telling him the truth. He has this affection for Big Frank, so the one glimmer of humanity that Paulie has, the one small 0.1% of human decency that he has, is actually the weakness that does Paulie in, and that Big Frank is one of the few people who would know this to take advantage of it.